The Christmas dinner that changed everything. My name is Judy, and I need to tell you about the Christmas dinner that shattered my world and then rebuilt it stronger than ever. I was 32 years old when I walked into my family's dining room for what I thought would be a simple holiday meal. Instead, I witnessed my father Raymond divide his entire fortune between my two brothers while declaring I would get nothing. What he didn't know was that I had been hiding the biggest secret of my life. But let me start from the beginning, because this story isn't just about money. It's about recognition, respect, and what happens when a family realizes they've been blind to who you really are. Growing up in the shadow. I grew up in Cedar Falls, a town where everyone knew everyone's business. Our house was the biggest on Elm Street, a sprawling Victorian that screamed success to anyone who passed by. My father Raymond owned the most successful construction company in 3 counties. He built shopping centers, office buildings, and pretty much everything that mattered in our part of the world. From the time I could walk, it was clear who mattered in the Barrett family hierarchy. My older brother Benjamin was the golden child, destined to take over the business. He had Dad's vision and natural leadership skills. My younger brother Brandon was the charmer, the one who could sell ice to Eskimos. And then there was me, stuck in the middle, trying to find my place in a world that seemed designed for men. Construction is a man's business, Judy, Dad would say whenever I showed interest in the company. You should focus on finding a good husband who can take care of you. This was in 2010, not 1950, but my father lived by old-fashioned rules. My mother Teresa would give me sympathetic looks but never challenged him. She came from a generation where wives supported their husbands' decisions, period. School became my escape. I discovered I had a gift for numbers and patterns. While my brothers were learning about concrete and steel beams, I was falling in love with something completely different, data analysis and digital marketing. I could see trends before they happened, understand what made people buy things, and predict market shifts with scary accuracy. My high school guidance counselor, Mrs. Peterson, was the first person who really saw my potential. Judy, you have something special, she told me during my senior year. The digital world is exploding, and you could be part of building the future. When college applications came around, I set my sights on Northwestern University in Chicago. Their business program was top-notch, and Chicago was where innovation happened. I worked my heart out on that application. When the acceptance letter arrived, I was over the moon. My father was not. The breaking point. Northwestern. In Chicago. Dad scoffed when I showed him the letter. That's ridiculous. The family business is here. Besides, do you have any idea what that school costs? I had done my research. I knew exactly how much it cost, and I had applied for every scholarship I could find. But there was still a gap that required family help. We were in his home office when I asked. The room smelled like leather and coffee, with awards and photos covering the walls. Behind his massive oak desk, Dad looked like a judge about to deliver a verdict. Your brothers need business degrees to run Barrett Construction, he explained, not even looking up from his papers. That's where the family money needs to go. Your computer thing is just a phase. It's not a phase, Dad, I said, my voice shaking. This is what I want to do with my life. Well, you'll have to figure out how to pay for it yourself, he replied coldly. I'm not throwing good money after bad. The conversation was over. Just like that. So I did exactly what he told me to do. I deferred admission for a year and worked 3 jobs. I waitressed at the local diner from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., worked retail at the mall from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m., and did bookkeeping for small businesses on weekends. I saved every penny, took out student loans, and barely slept for 12 months. When I finally made it to Northwestern the following fall, I was exhausted but determined. Building something from nothing. College was brutal. While other students partied and joined sororities, I was working 20 hours a week just to survive. I lived in the cheapest dorm, ate ramen noodles for dinner most nights, and studied in the library until it closed because my roommate liked to party. But I learned everything I could. Digital marketing was still new then, and most businesses had no idea how to reach customers online. I saw the future coming before almost anyone else did. My professors noticed my work. By junior year, I was helping local businesses build their online presence for extra cash. By senior year, I had a waiting list of clients. Meanwhile, back in Cedar Falls, Benjamin and Brandon had joined Barrett Construction as vice presidents. Every phone call with Mom included updates about their latest achievements and how proud Dad was of them. Don't get me wrong, I loved my brothers. But the contrast in how our paths were valued was like a knife to the heart every single time. The Secret Empire. After graduation, I moved to Chicago permanently and started my own digital marketing agency. The first year was terrifying. I lived in a studio apartment the size of most people's closets and survived on peanut butter sandwiches and coffee. But then something magical happened. Businesses started seeing real results from my strategies. A local restaurant's revenue doubled after I redesigned their online presence. A struggling boutique became the most popular shop in their neighborhood after my social media campaigns. Word spread. Clients started referring other clients. I hired my first employee, then my second, then my 10th. By year 3, we had expanded beyond Chicago. We were handling marketing for companies across the Midwest. By year 5, we had offices in 4 cities and over 50 employees. The crazy part. My family had no idea. They knew I was still in Chicago, still doing that computer thing, but I never shared details. And honestly, they never really asked. Our conversations were always about the family business, Benjamin's new house, Brandon's latest sales record, or Mom's garden club. I told myself I was protecting them from worrying about my risky career choice. But the truth was simpler, I was protecting myself from their judgment. The secret gets bigger. Year 7 was when everything exploded. A Fortune 500 company hired us to handle their complete digital transformation. The contract was worth more money than I had ever imagined possible. But that was just the beginning. Other major corporations took notice. We started working with household names, companies everyone in America knew. My little agency had become one of the fastest-growing marketing firms in the country. I moved into a penthouse apartment overlooking Lake Michigan. I bought a BMW, then traded it for a Tesla. I invested in real estate, then stocks, then other startups. My bank account had more zeros than I had ever dreamed possible. But I kept living a double life. When I visited home, which wasn't often, I drove a rental car and wore clothes from Target. I told everyone I was doing okay and kept my success completely hidden. Why? Part of it was fear that they'd think I was showing off. But mostly, I think I was waiting for someone in my family to ask real questions about my life, to show genuine interest in what I had built. That moment never came. The invitation that changed everything. Last November, Mom called with an unusual request. Your father wants the whole family together for Christmas dinner this year, she said. It's been too long since we were all in the same room. I hadn't been home for Christmas in 4 years. Work was always busy, and honestly, the tension with Dad made holidays stressful for everyone. He's getting older, Judy, Mom continued. I think he's realized how much he's missed having you around. Something in her voice made me say yes. Maybe it was time to bridge the gap with my family. Maybe Dad had softened with age. Maybe we could finally have the relationship I had always wanted. I booked my flight, rented a modest Honda, and packed my most understated clothes. Old habits die hard. The dinner that shattered everything. Christmas dinner was exactly like I remembered. The dining room table was set with Mom's best china, the Christmas tree sparkled in the corner, and the smell of her famous roast beef filled the house. Benjamin was there with his wife Stephanie and their twin boys, now 8 years old. Brandon brought his girlfriend and talked endlessly about his latest construction projects. Dad held court at the head of the table, telling stories about the early days of Barrett Construction and how proud he was of what his boys had accomplished. I tried to engage, asking questions about the business and sharing funny stories about living in Chicago. But it felt like I was speaking a different language. Every time I mentioned my work, the conversation somehow drifted back to construction projects and local gossip. Then, after dessert, Dad stood up and tapped his wine glass with a spoon. "I have an announcement to make," he said, his voice carrying that familiar authoritative tone. "As you all know, Barrett Construction has had its best year ever. We've expanded into 2 new states, and next year we're planning to go national." Benjamin and Brandon beamed with pride. Mom smiled and nodded approvingly. "This success means it's time to talk about the future," Dad continued. "I'm not getting any younger, and I want to make sure everything is handled properly when I'm gone." My stomach dropped. I knew where this was heading. "Benjamin will inherit my controlling stake in Barrett Construction," Dad announced. "He's proven himself as a leader and has the vision to take the company to the next level." Benjamin nodded solemnly, accepting this expected honor with practiced humility. "Brandon will inherit the family properties and a significant cash settlement," Dad continued. "His sales skills and people connections are invaluable to the family's continued success." Brandon raised his wine glass toward Dad in appreciation. Then Dad's eyes turned to me. "As for Judy," he said, his tone shifting slightly, "I've decided that since you've chosen to build your own life away from this family and our business, you won't be included in the inheritance." The words hit me like a physical blow. The room went completely silent. "You made your choice when you left for Chicago," Dad continued, as if he was explaining something perfectly reasonable. "Benjamin and Brandon have dedicated their lives to building what I started. They've earned their inheritance." I felt every pair of eyes in the room staring at me, waiting for a reaction. Mom's face had gone pale. Stephanie looked uncomfortable and was studying her napkin. Benjamin and Brandon sat frozen, clearly knowing this was coming but still shocked by the brutal delivery. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. 7 years ago, this announcement would have destroyed me. It would have sent me running to the bathroom in tears or caused me to lash out in anger. But I wasn't that person anymore. The moment everything changed. I set down my wine glass calmly and looked directly at my father. "I understand," I said simply. "Thank you for being honest about your feelings." Dad looked surprised by my reaction. I think he expected tears or arguments or begging. Instead, I picked up my fork and took another bite of Mom's apple pie. The tension around the table was suffocating. Benjamin shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Brandon cleared his throat but didn't say anything. That's when my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my assistant. Forbes just published their annual 40 under 40-foot list. "You're number 3. Congratulations, boss." I stared at the message for a moment, then looked up to find the entire table still watching me. "Actually, Dad," I said quietly, "there's something I should probably tell you about that life I built in Chicago." I pulled up the Forbes article on my phone and handed it to him. His face went from confusion to shock to disbelief as he read. The article featured a large photo of me standing in front of my company's Chicago headquarters, with the headline, "Judy Barrett, 32, built a $50 million marketing empire from her dorm room." "This says you're worth $50 million, Dad whispered, his voice barely audible. "The valuation is actually higher now," I said calmly. "We just secured 3 new Fortune 500 contracts this quarter." The room erupted in questions and exclamations. Benjamin grabbed the phone to read the article himself. Brandon's girlfriend started Googling my company on her own phone. Mom covered her mouth with her hands, tears forming in her eyes. The truth finally comes out. Why didn't you tell us? Mom asked, her voice breaking. I looked around the table at their shocked faces. When would I have told you? During the conversations where you talked about my computer thing like it was a hobby. During the phone calls where you never asked how business was going. During the visits where every success story shared was about Benjamin and Brandon. The uncomfortable truth hung in the air between us. I built Barrett Digital Marketing from nothing, I continued, my voice steady but filled with years of suppressed emotion. I started with $300 and a laptop in my dorm room. I now employ over 150 people across 6 cities. We work with companies you see on TV every single day. I pulled up my company's website on my phone and showed them the client list. Their eyes widened as they recognized logo after logo of major corporations. Last month alone, our campaigns generated over $200 million in revenue for our clients, I said. We've been featured in Business Week, Harvard Business Review, and the Wall Street Journal. I've been invited to speak at conferences around the world. Dad was staring at me like he was seeing a completely different person. But the most important thing, I said, standing up from the table, is that I built this without asking for anyone's approval or financial support. I built it after being told my dreams didn't matter. I built it while being excluded from every conversation about family success and legacy. The reckoning. The silence that followed was deafening. Brandon was the first to speak. Judy, I had no idea, he said quietly. This is incredible. Why did you keep it secret? I looked at each of them, these people I loved despite everything. Because I needed to prove to myself that I could do it, I said. I needed to know that my worth wasn't dependent on Dad's approval or this family's definition of success. I turned to my father, who still looked stunned. Dad, you just told me I'm not getting an inheritance because I chose to build my own life. You're absolutely right. I did choose that. And it was the best decision I ever made. I reached into my purse and pulled out a business card, placing it on the table in front of him. Barrett Digital Marketing has revenues that exceed Barrett Construction by about 400%, I said simply. We're opening a new office in Cedar Falls next month, and we'll be hiring about 50 local people. I thought you might want to know, in case anyone asks why there are suddenly a lot of good-paying jobs in town. Dad picked up the business card with shaking hands. I also thought you might want to know, I continued, that I've established a scholarship fund at Cedar Falls High School. It provides full college tuition for students who want to study business or technology but whose families can't or won't support their dreams. The apology that came too late. Mom started crying then, real tears that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside. I'm so sorry, honey, she whispered. I'm so proud of you. I should have said that years ago. Benjamin put his head in his hands. Judy, I feel like such an idiot. All these years, we thought you were struggling while we were building something important. You were building something incredible. You don't understand, I said, my voice finally showing some emotion. It's not about the money. It's about the fact that none of you ever asked. None of you ever showed interest in what I was doing with my life unless it related to finding a husband or coming back to work for Dad. I looked at my father, who had been silent throughout this entire exchange. I didn't need your inheritance, Dad, I said. I never did. What I needed was for you to believe in me. To see me as more than just the daughter who didn't fit into your plans. Dad finally found his voice. Judy, I made a mistake. You made a lot of mistakes, I corrected him. But the biggest one was assuming that because I chose a different path, it meant I had rejected this family. The power of walking away. I stood up from the table and smoothed down my simple sweater. I love all of you, I said, meaning it completely. But I've spent too many years waiting for this family to value who I am instead of mourning who I'm not. I hugged Mom, who held on to me like she was afraid I might disappear forever. I'm flying back to Chicago tomorrow morning, I told her. But maybe next time I visit, we can have a conversation about my life that doesn't involve anyone telling me what I should be doing differently. As I walked toward the door, Dad's voice stopped me. Judy, wait. I turned around to see him standing at the head of his table, looking older and more uncertain than I had ever seen him. I was wrong, he said, the words clearly difficult for him. About everything. About your dreams, about your choices, about what kind of success matters. I nodded, accepting the apology but not absolving him of the years of damage. I know you were, Dad, I said. The question is, what are you going to do differently now? 1 year later. I'm writing this story exactly 1 year after that Christmas dinner, and so much has changed. Dad did do things differently. 3 weeks after that awful dinner, he called me with a proposal. Barrett Construction wanted to hire Barrett Digital Marketing to handle all their marketing and online presence. Not as a favor, but as a legitimate business partnership. It was the first time he had ever treated me as an equal. The project was a huge success. We tripled their online visibility and helped them land contracts in 5 new states. More importantly, working together showed Dad exactly what I had built and how I had built it. Benjamin and Brandon both apologized privately, and our relationships have slowly healed. We'll never be as close as we might have been, but there's mutual respect now that didn't exist before. Mom and I talk every week now, and she asks detailed questions about my work, my employees, and my life in Chicago. She's become one of my biggest cheerleaders, bragging about my company to anyone who will listen. As for the inheritance Dad offered to reinstate after learning about my success, I politely declined. Keep it for Benjamin and Brandon, I told him. They've earned it by following your path. I earned something different by following mine. The real victory. The greatest victory wasn't the moment my family learned about my wealth. It was the moment I realized I didn't need their validation to feel valuable. For years, I carried the pain of not being seen, not being valued, not being included in the family's definition of success. That pain drove me to work harder, achieve more, and build something bigger than I ever imagined possible. But the real transformation came when I learned to value myself independent of their recognition. Money didn't heal my relationship with my family. Honest conversation, clear boundaries, and mutual respect did that. Success didn't prove my worth. It simply gave me the confidence to finally speak my truth. The scared young woman who left Cedar Falls with $300 and a broken heart had become someone who could stand at her father's dinner table and calmly explain that his approval was no longer required for her happiness. That transformation was worth more than any inheritance could ever be. The message. If you're watching this and you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been told your dreams don't matter, if you've ever been excluded from conversations about what's important or valuable, I want you to know something. Your path has value, even if others can't see it. Your dreams matter, even if others don't understand them. Your worth isn't determined by other people's approval, even when those people are your family. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to build something beautiful out of their rejection. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is succeed so completely that their opinions become irrelevant. And sometimes the most important moment in your life is when you realize that you don't need anyone's permission to be proud of who you've become. That Christmas dinner broke my heart one final time. But it also set me free in a way I never expected. And that freedom was worth everything.